everyone, I'm Vanessa, and today I'm here with our very special guest, Amjad, the CEO and founder of Replit. And today we're going to be having our first interview for the Venture Corner series. So Amjad, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure.
I wanted to take a step back to the beginning of your journey. What was it like growing up in Jordan as a kid and being fascinated by computers and the internet, but not really having much internet connection in general?
My first interaction with a computer was in 1993. I was 6 years old. And my father, who's in engineering in the government at the time, he didn't have a lot of money. I think he took out a loan to buy the computer. It was very expensive to buy a computer, especially over there. And I think it was some kind of IBM with Microsoft DOS on it. And I remember kind of looking at, actually one of my earliest memories is, we had this room at home, which was supposed to be a playroom for me and my brothers, but he put the computer there. And I remember just looking over his shoulders as he was, booting up the computer and sort of like finger typing kind of DOS commands. And he had like this big manual next to him. And he was trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And it didn't really do anything interesting, but I was fascinated by it. Like just a like DOS prompt of like, there's a machine that you can talk to was my impression of it at the time. And so every time my father would leave the room, I would go repeat some of the commands that he was doing, and I picked it up faster than he did. And I had this something intuitive about it for me that, I just kind of knew how the computer thought. And that like really stuck with me all my life, which is I'm able to simulate how a computer might work in my brain. And that I think made me a good programmer. But I didn't build any real applications until I was 13 years old. I was obsessed with Counter-Strike. I was obsessed with playing games at these LAN gaming cafes. So pre-internet, you actually, if you wanted to play games with friends, you would go to an actual store and you would sit down and play LAN games. You would connect to this local area network and you would play with friends. And a lot of these stores that were popping up all over Amman and the region were actually managed by pen and paper. And so you would go into the store and you would like pay whatever you want to pay to kind of play the game. And they would write your name and how many hours you have left to finish playing. And then, the store clerk would look at the clock and look at the paper all the time and until someone runs out of time, and they'll go and tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, you ran out of your hour that you paid for. Do you want to pay more? And so I pitched this idea to the store owner that like, hey, I can write software for you. You can make this a lot more secure. People can mess with your computers. You can have accounts and you can have gift cards. You can do all sorts of fun accounting things. So that was my first business idea. It took me actually 2 years to finish writing the software. Can you imagine now writing code with no internet? It's kind of crazy. I would run into a problem and then I would have to walk a few miles to go to that internet cafe and pay whatever, money change that I had to get like 15 minutes of the computer to look up a piece of code that I was stuck on, and then walk back home and then finish coding. And so it took 2 years to finish this application, but it was a huge hit and made me a lot of money for a teenager at the time.
How old were you when you finished it?
I think I was 15 when I started selling it.
Wow.
I was 10th grade.
That's impressive. Like also just have that drive to walk miles just to get 15 minutes of internet connection.
Yeah, I was just like fascinated by the internet. It's like just the idea that you can sit in front of a computer and connect to this like huge database of knowledge that all of humanity is like pooling everything they know into. I think a lot of the stuff today we take for granted is sort of sci-fi. The fact that the internet exists is kind of amazing.
Yeah, no, for real. Could you share what was 19-year-old Amjad like and what was driving you?
Yeah, I think, I had always this rebellious streak in me because in a lot of cases, I just felt like things could be better. I think that's the entrepreneurial drive that I have as well, which is you look at the world around you and you see all these bad decisions being made And I still feel that way very much about the world. Like there's a lot of things that could be better with like better decision making and better people in charge. And so in school, I was not really excited about how they taught computer science, how they taught programming. I thought the idea of just sitting in class the whole day just didn't make a lot of sense. And I'd rather be building stuff. I'd rather be learning by doing. The thing that really drove me while I was college is actually doing work. And so I got a job. I was working in IT at the time. I had this idea that AI is going to make software, it's going to automate software away. So like, I know how to program. I'm like a teenager and I like better than a lot of programmers. And started reading science fiction, kind of educating myself about AI. I was really fascinated by it. And I had this feeling that software as a job is going to go away. And so when I got into university, I studied computer hardware, I studied computer engineering. And I also went to work for an IT company because I thought once computers actually know how to program themselves, someone still would need to build the computers and plug them in. And so I thought that's how you're going to get job security by doing IT. Of course, now I'm working on automating some aspects of software, although I don't think it's going to get automated away entirely. And it was a wrong prediction to make, and I sort of corrected it later on and went back to learning how to code. But eventually, I think the story I'm known for in college is I ended up hacking into universities' databases and changing my grades.
So I felt this indignation that I felt that I was being wronged because a lot of teachers were giving me bad grades because I'm not sitting in class.
Yeah.
So I would still do well in the exams, but attendance was this big thing in Jordan. I know in the US it's slightly better. Some professors probably care about it, but it was this mandate that you had to attend every class. And I just couldn't. I just can't sit still and like not do anything and just, learn something I already know. I felt it was I felt it was unjust for them to fail me. And I felt it was just for me to actually correct that injustice. So I ended up hacking into the university's database and changing my grades so I could graduate. And all my friends were graduating. And so I went and bought the gown, did everything, went to the parties and just acted as if I was graduating. Eventually, they ended up catching me. And the reason they ended up catching me is because of a bug in their code. Basically, one day I get a call and the guy responsible for the university's databases tells me that the entire registration system is offline and they're running into this bug with the system. And he tells me the problem, the invariant that they were running into is that my grades were such that I was passing and at the same time banned from taking the exam. So it turns out there's a Boolean that they know that when the teacher fails you for attendance, that Boolean switched. And then your grade defaults to 35 out of 100. So that's a failing grade. So I raised my grade, but I didn't know about that Boolean. Of course, if you're a good engineer, that's like keeping state in two places, right? So they were doing a wrong thing. And all their variable names were single letter variables. So it was really hard to figure out all these field names. Anyways, it ended up bringing down the university system. And so I come clean and I tell them what I did and why I did it. And I told them I'd like to help them. And in fact, I did get a job there doing cybersecurity for the university and fixed the university system and became very well known in the university and in the wider tech community in Jordan till this day. And it ended up being a very positive experience. And I think it was really great on their behalf to actually not try to go after me very hard and put me in jail or something like that.
Wow, that's crazy. I did not know. I knew that you like hacked the university system, but I didn't know that you like chased grades. But that's certainly.
I do not recommend it for kids at Berkeley.
It's almost like your whole life has been leading up to building Replit just because you've always been so fascinated by computers. So like, I'm curious, how did it kind of go along that? And then when did you really start to say, I'm going to build this into a real company?
The need for it started when I was trying to learn as many programming languages as I can learn. I got, after I shifted back to software, I got really interested in programming languages. Um, I started reading Paul Graham's essays and Hacker News and things like that. And I got interested in Lisp and these like older languages. And two things came out of this. One is like, it's freaking hard to kind of set up a new programming language on your computer. It's just a lot of work, a lot of downloading software, and especially like languages like Java, you have to download gigabytes worth of software to just run Java. And the other thing is like, I just wanted a place where I can like play, like a playground. And there wasn't many kind of programming playgrounds online. There wasn't any actually. And I want to be able to switch between different programming languages, try this in JavaScript, try this in Lisp and Python, see how they're different. And so a combination of a real need, not having a laptop and being on the go all the time, being at work, being at university, and having to set up these programming environments everywhere. And my deep interest in programming languages made this project obvious, which is how do you make an online playground where you can play and learn different languages? Again, this became a multi-year project almost immediately because the idea is so ambitious, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do something no one has ever done before. And so having the audacity and naivety to not know how hard it was going to be was actually a blessing. And I still have that to this day. I still attempt a lot of hard things and fail miserably a lot of the time. But I think that's like a good thing because people just get cynical when they get older. And I think for people watching this, mostly college students, I assume, I think it's good to kind of stay naive in some way, selectively naive, I think, such that you can approach big problems and be ambitious. And so that was like a multi-year project. The first prototype was very quick. It took me a weekend. I just put a text box and like a button that says, run JavaScript, and you can run JavaScript because the browser already runs JavaScript. But then it was like, how do I add Python? I'm interested in Python. And eventually the breakthrough we had was we were the first to compile Python to JavaScript. And now the technique is called WASM, right? Like WebAssembly. But that was that was the predecessor to it. It was called Mscripton at the time. It was this research project by Mozilla we ended up contributing to, and we were the first to kind of apply it to programming languages. So we ended up with this open source project. It was called Replit. The engine was called JS REPL. And the idea was that how can you run different programming languages in the browser? And we put it up on Hacker News and went viral on the internet. Inventor of JavaScript tweeted about it. And I thought that was amazing. Like, me and a couple of my friends who helped me in Jordan, kids in Jordan, like being able to make a contribution to the open source world was something I was really proud of. And I wanted to build a company around it, but the problem is the infrastructure for entrepreneurship was not present in Jordan at the time. It's got a lot better, but at the time you couldn't really find any funding. And even if you could find funding, people would want to buy half of your company for $10,000, right? It's kind of crazy. So I got a job from Code Academy, who were actually two college students dropping out of Columbia. They used my software to build the initial version of Code Academy. So they sent me an offer. I joined them right out of YC. They were coming out of YC, and they got me an O1 visa, and I came to New York. And started the actual Replit company in 2016. So 5 years after that, I went to work for Facebook, did a lot of open source there, and then started the company when combination of, I didn't think anyone else was going to build it. Like I copied, like the technology was there, but no one else was doing really what I wanted to do. And two, like Haya and I, like my wife and co-founder, had enough money to kind of, be able to bootstrap this thing. We had our immigration status. We had a green card to be able to actually leave a job without getting kicked out of the country. So confluence of those factors. So in 2016, we ended up starting the company.
So you kind of started it a little bit before you joined Code Academy. right? I guess like, and then that gap between 2016, working at Facebook as well, like how important was it to do that before jumping in and building it? Do you think that Replit would achieve its success today if you hadn't like worked in that time frame before?
I mean, some days I think actually it would be more successful because you'd be like first to market. We'd have made a lot of progress. But sometimes I think it's actually I'd be a lot more inexperienced. And having worked for young founders before, and I've talked to a lot of young founders, I think it's really brutal to be a super young
founder and like hit these high growth startup milestones. It works out for the people we hear about, such as Zuck and Bill Gates and people like that. But it does work out. But I think those are the sort of survival ship bias stories. I think there's a lot of people who struggle with basic things of like running a company commits you to being to having certain personality traits that are hard to develop younger, such as being able to just give feedback to people. It's tough for a lot of people. It took me a long time to figure out how to like give feedback to people, but you're either like too nice or too much of an asshole. It's kind of hard to figure out the best way to do it. Just hiring and firing people is super hard. Fundraising is super hard.
A lot of people problems are really hard, and those are the kind of things that you get better at with wisdom. I don't like regret or anything like sort of questioning the past or how the past unfolds. What I will say, and I kind of said it in this interview before, which is just, follow your passion, follow the path you're on. I think it'll unfold in ways that are natural. And I don't think you should have to make hard decisions such as like, I want to drop out, or I want to start a startups. Like, work on interesting things, and kind of the world will unfold in a way that either forces you to start a startup, or you join a startup, or do something else. Just focus on doing interesting things. I think that's the most important thing. And don't overthink these decisions when they come up, and trust your gut and go with it.
Yeah, I like that because, like, personally, in my opinion, and also I know a lot of others in spaces as well, it's like you feel like sometimes you just have this idea, or that you have the vision of the company you want to build, and you're like debating whether to actually go for it. But I think you're right in the sense that if you really just focus on things you're genuinely interested in, the opportunity will come naturally, like organically. And I think that's what happened with like Replit too. So hopefully a lot of students can.
I think a lot of really cool startups sort of happen this way. And on the other hand, like you look at stories like Theranos, and that person like wanted so bad to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying everyone who wants to be an entrepreneur like that, but I think there's a pathology that happens of like playing a role as opposed to actually doing something interesting you're actually really excited about or want to do. And playing a role of like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur will get you, I think, into unhealthy places of actually not being authentic to yourself. And the most authentic thing to do is to find interesting problems you want to solve and just go full force into them. And if it continues to be interesting, things will just unfold naturally.
Yeah. You coined the term seek pain, which I really like, because I think it's so important to really like face. How important is it for Gen Z to adopt that?
Yeah, so seek pain is a company value, actually. People at Replit, when they want to join a Replit, they sign that I'm going to seek pain. Well, they have to look at as part of our offer, we give them our values. So part of signing the offer is signing up for some pain. So look, I think pain is a way that's been programmed into us by evolution, by God, whatever it is that you believe in. It is the way that humans actually learn, right? Without pain, you would not learn that like fire is harmful for you, right? So that's the most basic level of learning that every organism that has a nervous system has, which is like if you experience pain, you want to change your behavior and you will want to do that behavior again, right? So pain is important as a mechanism of learning, but also pain is important as a mechanism of growth. When you go to the gym, you're experiencing pain, right? And that pain leads to growth of your muscles and your health and all of that. And I think as the world gets more comfortable, everything gets more convenient and you can just sort of order food from your phone.
Like, we'll watch movies on Netflix and not really have to leave the home for anything. And as we've seen in the pandemic, people are just like get habituated this idea of just living a very comfortable life without pain. And most people actually get depressed from that life. It's not actually a healthy life, but it is a pain avoidance type of life. And so actually it's important in this day and age where our lives are so comfortable that we seek uncomfortable things. And you want to seek challenges because life used to give you challenges in the past. And some people in the world, that's still their life. But in the West, especially growing up middle or upper class, life is sort of kind of okay, right? And like for you to actually grow, you put yourself in situations where you're probably going to experience pain.
I think a lot, and even just social media and technology, like for kids nowadays that are being born in this era, it's like there's less interaction with the physical world, I feel like, which I think a lot of pain sometimes comes from, physically getting out and like doing things. But, now you can stay at home, you can do things like super easily.
Being social is painful.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I actually, like, specifically have a question about that because I think like technology, AI, and all of that is like incredible in terms of furthering humanity. But I guess what do you think the future of humanity will look like with increased technology? Because are you afraid of humans becoming more isolated and lonely and not being able to like socially interact perhaps?
Yeah. So I think the question goes back to the question of capitalism, right? So capitalism is this engine that is impersonal and in a lot of ways inhuman, in a lot of ways actually somewhat of an intelligent, autonomous system. It's not conscious, but it is a system that produces a lot of innovation, produces a lot of wealth, produces a lot of services, and satisfies a lot of human desires. And so AI and technology and all of that are sort of products of capitalism, right? Capitalism is sort of amoral. It can produce good things. It can produce bad things. It can produce things that could be used for good or bad. It can produce a lot of addictions, right? It can produce, sweet, fatty food that people get addicted to. It can produce nicotine products people can get addicted to, or pornography, or all sorts of things that we don't think are entirely healthy as a society. The question is, how do you make sure society and humanity is able to leverage capitalism without being subject of the system, without being enslaved by it in a lot of ways? And that's a really tough question. As capitalist as you can get, and I think it's the best system. But I think without a good culture and good morality, it can get really, really bad. One of my favorite books is this small book that has a lot of answers to the Fermi paradox. Do you know the Fermi paradox? So the Fermi paradox is this idea of like, given how vast space is, where are the aliens, right? So there's the Fermi equation, I think, where you can plug in different variables, and invariably it feels like we should be seeing aliens, right? Or at least a lot of physicists and cosmologists feel like that should be the case. And so the Fermi paradox is, given how vast space is, where are the aliens? Why are we alone? This book, and I think it's something like 42 answers to the Fermi paradox or something like that, presents a lot of different answers to the Fermi paradox. Some of them are really crazy, like we live in a simulation, or we live in a zoo. Like there are aliens out there that because we're like a pet species, they keep us in a zoo or something like that. But one answer that's like quite depressing, and I think it's the most likely, is civilizations become advanced technological civilizations, and then they spend most of their time in hyper addictive behavior, such as they spend most of the time in entertainment and other addictive things, simulation, such that they don't have a drive to actually go explore the stars. I feels like that's the most likely thing that would happen, right?
No, I literally feel like that too, especially for like kids nowadays, like really young kids, because they're like, what do you do when you're bored? You just pull out your phone. I see her always on her phone. Like, it makes me not want to go on my phone because I just see how much the addiction is. And like, we are contributing to building these products and building like technology that can increase our productivity, but then at the same time, we're becoming victims to the stimulation almost. And people are like almost losing touch to like their spirituality in a sense. They're like, oh, who they really are. And I just think that's not good. And I want to option.
It's tough. And like in the past, we've had religions that provided some structure around human action and around markets that helped us navigate very thorny moral and spiritual situations. But now reality is religion is not a major force anymore. And so I think we're in uncharted territory as just human beings. And like, I don't know what's the answer, what the answer is going forward. And maybe it is religion is the answer, but maybe it is something else. Definitely the answer is not like regulation, because I think that produces all sorts of unintended effects that are like perhaps more negative. Maybe there are some regulatory things you can do, especially around kids, that are important. But it's a blunt tool and it creates all sorts of negative consequences. But I think it's an important question. I think that's a question that someone could dedicate their life to and to try and answer that question.
I guess like I want to make sure to be conscious of time too. I think we're almost over. So I'll ask my last question and then a lot of other questions in my head. So for all students watching this, and all founders, I guess like what advice would you have for them, or like what would you hope that they can hear and that they could take from this interview?
You know, I think we are living in a very unique time. And yes, most people will say that about their times. Like, I think, everyone grows up thinking they're in a unique time. But I think we're objectively in a very unique time. Like, we are at the precipice of creating intelligent programs
that could potentially surpass us in intelligence. We are at a point in time where we're maybe not spacefaring, but maybe we're going to be pretty soon, right? We are at this transitional era from primarily an industrial society to primarily an information-based society,
where most workers are actually doing information-based work. And also we're at a moment in time where the geopolitical situation is very unstable. I think there are a lot of different forks in the road, and a lot of them are bad. And I think figuring out how to arrive at the good forks in this world that we're living in is going to be very important. I think, fame and money and all of that is fine. It's okay to have a goal around that. But I think you can also harmonize these goals and actually try to build something that's actually positive and at the same time being successful and famous and rich. I think those things are possible. The most important thing is actually not to contribute to the madness we were talking about. Like, don't build addictive, harmful things. I see a lot of people now, these like AI girlfriends and boyfriends, right?
I say that replica.
Yeah, all these companies, and they rationalize. They're like, oh, this is good for X, Y, and Z. It's like, obviously bad. Stop doing that.
Please stop. Making guys addicted to AI.
Yeah, it's just don't work on harmful things and try to work on positive things.
Totally agree. I think we need more intention behind building and like being sure that, and if people really just like take the time to think about what and like feel what they genuinely are interested in, I'm sure that'll be good and not.
To just be honest, like, don't rationalize your decisions post how to making a decision, right? Yeah. Start from the point of view, like what actually is cool and interesting and productive and fun, and like my friends and family would get value out of it. Like if you were working on AI girlfriend, like would you want your family to use it? Would you want your father to have an AI? I would want my father to use Replit. Sometimes he does, right?
Yeah.
And so just work on things that makes you proud.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing that, of course. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something from this. I'm sure you did. I personally learned a lot. Stay tuned for future interviews with industry leaders. So thank you so much.